Hi. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Stories of Asia Community Chats. I'm Sarah, and today with us we have Sam Bobertz all the way from Hong Kong. Hi, Sam. It's so great to have you here with us.
It's good to be here. It's good to be here and be part of this Stories of Asia series. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. So, for everyone watching, Sam is from StarMaker Hong Kong. It's a transformation and coaching consultancy that infuses a little bit of psychology as well as theater acting to bring out the best in people and teams. Sam, do you want to share a little bit more about what you do with the audience here?
Sure, absolutely. It's interesting. So it starts really with my journey and my life itself, to be honest with you. About say 8, 9 years ago, I started a conversation with my mother. I was living and working in Beijing at the time, and as part of that, I basically um, I was tasked with opening up a new hotel, and I had to basically develop my teams and get them on board and ready to go over about a year's period. And during that period, I recognized that there was something about that development process that I really enjoyed. It was engaging. It was something that I felt like I was helping people become sort of better versions of themselves, and in turn, I was learning more about myself and so on. And so, really, it was during that period that I recognized that there was something about the process of within a corporate context, the process of giving people an opportunity to develop themselves, not necessarily just in terms of their careers, but in terms of their own personal skills and their sense of purpose in the work that they do. And so in doing that, I basically I recognized that in this day and age, in order to, for me, I was a manager and I was a leader at the time. In order for me to be able to effectively do this and engage my teams and give them a sense of really wanting to kind of align around a single goal, which in our case was to kind of make a splash in the city and to provide the best possible service we could provide. I needed to give them incentive. I needed to give them a sense of growth. And the aha moment for me was that a modern leader and a modern manager in many ways is a teacher. They're a facilitator. They're an educator. And in doing so, your goal is to really, if nothing else, is to give your teams an opportunity to feel like if they are going to leave, and assuming that we can all accept the fact that people come and they go, it's completely natural. However, the ideal is that they stay as long as you possibly can keep them there. And the ideal is that if you can come to some kind of agreement where off the bat, they feel like if they are leaving, that they're graduating, not quitting. And that was sort of an aha moment for me, is if I could create it in my department, sort of a sense of being kind of like an academy, where if they were leaving, they were going on to bigger and better things. And in doing so, we had kind of guided them along that way to help give them the tools that they needed. And so what I did was I reached out to my mother, who was a corporate and executive coach and has been based out of Hong Kong for many, many, many years. She started about 25 years ago here. Her background's in theater, but she recognized early on that through the lens of theater, and in particular through the lens of a director, you can understand how to get the most out of other human beings. It's really kind of looking at the human perspective from a very specific lens. And so I started to naturally ask her for tips. It's like, what are ways that I could really create this academy? What are ways that I can engage my teams more effectively, and so on? And so she began to share with me some of the tools that she was using. And I would, about maybe once or twice a month, we'd get on the phone over about a 3-year period. And little by little by little, the conversation just became more natural and more organic. And my background at university, I studied East Asian philosophy and I studied psychology. And I found that a lot of what she was talking about, what she was doing with executives throughout Asia, was very much in line with what we knew in terms of modern psychology. That looking at the human perspective from the lens of theater was really about understanding the human condition. And that's very much what psychology looks to do as well. And in fact, I studied East Asian philosophy, and in many ways, a lot of Eastern philosophy is really about not so much why we do what we do, but more how we can navigate the uncertainty of life. And so what we ended up doing was my mother and I ended up having a conversation one day, quite naturally. She never pushed me. She never even suggested to me necessarily that we should work together. It kind of, one day we were talking about, just sort of sharing ideas back and forth about some of the things that we could do. And we both kind of just had this aha moment where we looked at each other and said, what if we do this as a business? And so, yeah, about 8 years ago, the conversation started, and about 6 years ago, we started a company together, and that is StarMaker. And so we really do, we take elements of all of these concepts, as well as our relationship as a mother-son team, and look to sort of say, okay, how do different people communicate, and how can we adjust our behaviors accordingly to really speak to the universal humanity of people, regardless of what industry you're in or what you're trying to pursue in life.
Mm. That is so incredible. Thank you for sharing your story. Oh my gosh,
Sure.
there's so many points I want to go into in there. And I think it's part of the reason like why we wanted to talk to you about this topic, about cultivating a growth mindset, because that is what
Yeah.
you specialize in, like developing people, right? Making them
Hmm.
become like part of their best. So I think that's something that's kind of important for me at least during COVID-19, because like you're no longer working at the office, the dynamic is entirely different. You need a lot of motivation from within, and we would love to like find out a little bit more about how we can like develop that ourselves. And the
Sure.
second point
Sure.
I would also like to talk about is the family dynamic, because like you talked about how you started working with your mom, and now because all of us are at home, right, we are put into this dynamic where we have to be around our family members a lot. How can we make that work for us? How can we make peace with it, or how can we make things better? Those are like some of
Right.
the things we could talk about, but maybe
Right.
first to begin with we could talk about cultivating a growth mindset. Do you have like any tips for people that you might want to give for people who are at home?
Right. I think, honestly, Sarah, I think these two things can, in many ways, kind of be connected. But I'll start with growth mindset, and we'll branch off to the family element of it.
Okay.
I think off the bat, one of the best things to do is to define what we mean by that, because I think it's at first glance, you look at growth mindset, it's like, yes, a mindset of growth. Um, However, I think that there's some nuances that are a little bit more subtle and important to kind of identify here. One is that maybe by looking at growth mindset, you look at the opposite of it, which is sort of a fixed mindset. And by understanding sort of the difference between two, they're both kind of made a little bit clear. So a fixed mindset basically goes under the presumption that I was born with specific skills. I have these skills and I know what I need to do. I'm sort of fixed in my way or the highway. I'm basically, the conclusion is that I'm right. And a growth mindset, basically from the beginning, assumes that the individual does not know. They understand that there's going to be limitations to what I could possibly be able to truly be able to understand in this world, and that I could be made stronger by leveraging the people around me and really learning as much as I can from the situation. There's a saying in Chinese, which is 三人请必有我师焉, which basically means of every 3 people that I meet, at least one of them will be a teacher of mine. And I think that there's something quite powerful in that realization, even beyond people, just within circumstances. You know, you could have a close relationship with your dog and see the resilience of your dog after they've had, say, surgery or something, and be inspired by that. And I think there's wisdom all around us if we're willing to look. And part of that is accepting that we don't really know, and it's the ability to hand on heart be able to say, I made a mistake, or I don't know, or what do you think? It's about sort of cultivating a curiosity, because only when we are willing to abandon what I like to call the unbearable rightness of being, the sense that I know and I'm right, it's very much grounded in this sense of ego, that we can begin to truly grow and leverage things around us. In fact, there's something, I wear this all the time, and it's actually a perfect opportunity.
What is that?
It's a pin that I wear,
Uh-huh.
and what it says is, no one really knows.
Nice.
And it's something that I saw, and I keep on me. It's more of a reminder for me, just that when we were children, we look to the adults and we assume that the adults have everything figured out and they understand how things work. And then, of course, then you grow up and you become an adult and you look around, you realize, oh my God, no, we're all figuring this out as we go.
Yeah.
And I think there's something kind of humbling about that. You know, there's a certain humility to recognizing that, oh, okay, so we're all sort of experimenting. We're all continually looking to sort of better ourselves and hopefully better the people around us in doing so. And I think that's something that the recent outbreak has really kind of shone light on, is that we could be, you know, when things are good, we assume that it's invincible, and then things start to fall apart, and we have to look back and take a step back and look at, okay, so how do we overcome? And I think part of that goes back to developing this idea of cultivating a growth mindset. And I think the first step really is humbling yourself, not assuming that you're right, and looking at the language that you're using. You know, when you're communicating with people, are you Are you putting their ideas down, or are you giving them an opportunity to really come to the surface and exploring them? Because that's in many ways sort of the foundation of innovation and creativity, is taking ideas and playing with them. And so there's kind of a playful element to a growth mindset as well. And so, I mean, one of the things I would say about the realities of dealing with COVID for everybody around the world really is really recognizing where we're getting in our own way. Where is what we used to think getting in our way in terms of basically blocking us from helping us get to where we need to be? And that's something that I'm talking about a lot these days with my clients and with my friends and with my family, is where were we, where are we, and where do we need to be? And because there's going to be a little bit of differences between these. And if we recognize where we need to be, we can sort of reverse engineer or work backwards from there in terms of figuring out what we need to do now. And that'll make letting go of some of the things that we need to let go of easier. Because part of progress by definition is sacrificing the now for the future. You cannot progress unless you change, and change is a constant.
That's amazing. That's a lot of stuff to
Sure,
look into.
sure.
I love all the points that you mentioned, like about humility first of all, letting go of your ego, and also like being able to look at like where you've been, where you need to be, and also taking a step back, letting other people's ideas come forward. These are all really, really great concepts. I just want to take a moment to pause and say hi to the people in the comments. Hi, Senway. Hi, Danem. Hi, Sam. And hi, Jolie. Jolie, I see you have a question. Maybe let's see if we can feature that up on the screen. I'm going to read it out anyway. Jolie is asking a question about the growth mindset. She's saying, is the growth mindset something that you need to come to terms with yourself, or does it come from external factors? How do you instill a growth mindset? I guess she's also kind of asking for actionable tips or like practices she can put into place for herself to help develop that.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's a wonderful way of kind of exploring this idea as well. Is, I talked about comparing it to, say, a fixed mindset, which assumes it's right, but also understanding, well, where does this sort of come from? I think that's a great way to play around with this a bit. I mean, when I was in university, one of my professors said to me early on, they said, understanding psychology, for many people, they assume it's about understanding other people. However, inevitably, when it comes down to it, all you can really ever understand is yourself. And through that, you can begin to infer what other people might be like. But the pursuit of self-awareness is really a big part of a growth mindset. In order to become sort of willing to abandon things that you take as a truth for what you could potentially learn and how you can potentially evolve, it requires you being willing and understanding where your sort of your own reality or the realm of your comfort zone lies. And so I would suggest that really, I mean, when it comes down to it, one of the big things that I often do is I talk about language. So when looking at personality, first off, to answer the question, it's very much an individual pursuit. I mean, things around you can certainly make it easier or make it more difficult. But in the end, it always comes down to you as an individual. We can't control the outside world, and that's a big part of dealing with COVID. Is recognizing the limitations of what we can control in life. You basically have two levers. You can control your mindset. You can control your behavior. That's it. Your behavior and your mindset can impact other things, but you can't control them. You can influence them. And so in life, we're basically pulling one of two levers. Is that, do I need to shift my mindset, or do I need to shift my behavior? A good way of looking at this is there's an individual called Zohar Adner. And he used a simple metric. You think about like a chart. So basically you have you have two axes. You have one here along the bottom, that is reality. That is the situation itself. And the other is this is your expectations. The space in between the two, that is the amount of stress or anxiety or fear that we feel. So if the reality and your expectations are completely misaligned, there's a lot of fear. However, if you can close that, and sometimes you can change your reality, you change the situation. I'm uncomfortable in this room, good. I'm gonna leave the room. But sometimes you can't control the reality. Sometimes, like COVID, there's nothing we can do to change that. So we can't pull the lever. So then we have to change our mindset. And that can help align us again with reality. And it's not abandoning things, but a big part of that is coming to acceptance. accepting what we can't control, and then empowering ourselves through that reflection in terms of recognizing what you can control. And I think part of that is simplifying it. And that's why I like the 2 levers, because then all of a sudden it's, I don't have to worry about everything else. I just have to worry about 2 things. What's my mindset and what are my behaviors? And so when it comes down to it, I think, that's a great first step. Another one is recognizing where you're using yes, but. By that, what I mean is the opposite of yes, but is yes, and. This is something we talk about in improv theater, improvised theater, and the idea that life is improvised. Improv theater actually lends itself quite nicely to life, in that we don't know what's going to happen and change is constant. And so by developing the skills and the tools that improvisers use, you actually strengthen yourself as an improviser. And one of the key elements, the reason I use the yes and yes but, is that we are, in many ways, we're our own worst critics. We are so very, very hard on ourselves. And in turn, sometimes we can be hard on the people around us without even intentionally doing it. Sometimes it's as simple as the difference between saying, when somebody has an idea or says something, it's again coming back to it and saying, am I saying, oh yes, and we could do this, which is saying, yes, I agree with your reality, with your statement, and I'm willing to collaborate with you, versus saying yes, but, which means I might see your reality. Yes is more just sort of pleasant, but basically means that you're wrong and I know better. I mean, if you think about it in any language, but basically means that you are incorrect and I have a better insight into this. And the same thing could be true for, if somebody says, oh, that won't work. What if you said, instead of that won't work, what if you changed it to how might we make that work? Just catch yourself when you're saying these things. We can't do that because. We can't do that because. Or what if you phrased it as, how might we get over an obstacle like this? The subtle changes, but they completely are night and day in terms of how you are seeing the world. Is it something where you're looking for the problem, or are you looking for the solution? And that's a big part of a growth mindset, is, are we looking for solutions? Are we solutions focused? Are we generating ideas that are going to help us overcome something? Because anybody can identify issues, but identifying ways to solve those issues, that's something that's a little bit more difficult. And it all starts with the way that we describe things, because that reflects the way that we see things.
I love it. I love it. I actually haven't really thought much of growth mindset as something that's a little bit more team oriented, because I always thought it's about how can I improve myself? How can I improve my skills? But I see from what you're saying, it's about like, how can I add value to other people and what they have to say? How can I collaborate to make things better? And that's also definitely part of the growth mindset. So I love it very much.
Yeah. We're pack animals. We need other people, We are greater. We're greater than the sum of our parts. That's what a big part of civilization about teamwork is, that we are individuals, but we are also, the way I like to, the way I say it, is we are greater than the sum of our parts because we are both the sum and the parts. It's both together that makes it powerful. And so I think it's misleading and sometimes a little short-sighted to assume that it's just individual or it's just collective. It's a little bit of both, and we need to sort of yin and yang. We need to fluctuate between both. In order to really be of value, which I know we'll talk about today as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's like playing to everyone's superpowers, like their strengths,
Yeah.
We have another question from Logayashini. She says, great to hear from y'all. This is a question for you, Sam. It's clear that your mom is a great inspiration. What or who else inspires you to have the mindset that you have?
I could attribute this to any number of people, to be honest with you. And I think it's not any one person, although I would say my mom is certainly a big influence and impact on me. But the same is true of my sister, of my father, of my friends, of my uncle. I wouldn't say that there's any one individual. I think it's sort of over time, I've been given little nuggets of wisdom, either explicitly somebody saying something to me, or it's things that I've observed that I really looked at and saw. And this could be positive or negative, to be honest with you. I can think of when I was in college, I had a manager, and he really wasn't very good. And there was lots of things that I observed of that behavior. And the same was when I was in high school. There was some older, bad teenagers that I looked at. that I saw, and I recognized that I want to make sure that I don't end up like that.
Okay.
And there's something powerful about that as well, is learning from example. And it goes back to that sort of Confucian saying that you can learn from anybody and anything. It's just depending on whether or not you have that, again, growth mindset. Are you looking for an opportunity to learn? Or are you in a position where you're looking to just impose what you assume is right onto the world? Because I think that can sometimes make it very difficult to truly evolve and to fluctuate with time and reality as it comes at us, because we don't know, and we have to adapt. Yeah. So
What
a lot
you
of
said
people.
is,
Yeah.
oh, sorry, I just had something come to mind. Like, remember Jolie's question? She was asking whether growth mindset was something internal or external. I
Yeah.
remember this, and you were saying that you can learn from basically anyone, whether it's a good example, like a good manager, or it could be a bad manager. So I heard of this
Mm.
example where there was an abusive father, and he had two sons, and both of them, they were like really beat up, treated like in the worst way possible. And when they grew up and they had their own families, they carried on with life. One of the sons became just like his father, like he would beat up his wife and his children as well. And the other son, he was a really good father. He really took care of his children and his wife, and he never hit them, and made sure he built them up and everything. So he was a really good
Mm.
family there. And the funny thing is, if you asked both of them, like, why are you this way? They would say the same thing. It's because I
Right.
can't imagine myself being any other person because of the way my dad raised me up. So that
Right.
just like
Right.
points
Right.
to the question. Yeah, it points to the fact that it can be internal as well, no matter like what happens to you outside. And I love
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. I was
Yeah.
just agreeing. Sorry. I'm just saying. Absolutely. That's a great example.
Yeah, I loved it like on this video that I saw. And yeah, I think it's a great thing to think about as well.
Yeah.
We have another question. This one is saying, hi Sam, you mentioned that we need to figure out a goal before we try to work and grow towards it. What if some people are not so sure of their own targets yet? How can we still try to grow in that sense? That's a great question.
That is a great question. Yeah, I think honestly, one of the exercises was Steve Covey, because nobody can tell you what your goal is, and you can reflect on your childhood, for instance. What is the nature of the things that you enjoyed, and what order did they come in, and how has it evolved to date, and are you still enjoying those sorts of things? But it's not just about enjoyment. I mean, establishing a goal is about being practical and pragmatic in the world as well. I mean, I would suggest starting off by possibly doing something along the lines of, say, a Big Five personality assessment. What that can do is that can help sort of articulate for yourself, what are your comfort zones? What are the things that energize you, and what are the things that take away energy from you? And that's the best way to really understand personality. Is there are certain things that energize us, and there are certain things that take energy away from us. Like you can have an introvert who's very confident. You can have an extrovert who's not confident. It's not really about confidence. It's more about the way that we enjoy stimulation. So extroverts like lots of noise. You can take an extrovert and put them in a room that is completely silent, no lights, no music, no nothing. And that extrovert, you'd find very quickly, would begin to get exhausted. They'd probably start to click, tap on their arm. They may even start to talk to themselves, whistle. They need some form of stimulation. Where if you did the opposite, say with an introvert, and you put them in a room and you started blasting music and flashing lights on them, they'd very quickly just start getting exhausted. So it's really about physiologically what energizes us and what takes away energy from us. And so by understanding, you're sort of symbolically understanding your own personality, you build a vocabulary around these sorts of things. And that can help target you around certain things, because there's many things we could use as a goal. And identifying if you have a menu with a million things on it, it's very hard to know where to start. So this can help you narrow things down and saying, okay, well, given my nature and of course my own values and the things that I like to do, what could I potentially like to pursue as a goal in my life? And the values thing is I mentioned Covey a moment ago, and he has a wonderful exercise. It's sort of deliciously simple, but quite profound. The way he described it was that if you were a fly on the wall, and this is a hypothetical situation, but if you were a fly on the wall and you were attending your own, you were at an event and you see all the people from your life coming in, and it's people that you love most and the people that you truly, truly respect in this life, and they're there, and you realize that this is a funeral. In fact, this is your own funeral. You are attending your own funeral as a fly on the wall. So you can't speak, you can't interject. All you can do is watch. And the people that you respect most, the people that you really care what they have to say about you, they get up and they start giving their eulogy about the kind of person that you were. What sorts of things are they saying? You know, you can do this as a written exercise. And this can help not tell you what you should be doing, but help basically build sort of a compass for you, a north, south, east, west. If you can identify some central themes based on what the kind of person, if at the end of your life, the people you care most, your legacy, your story, the impact you had on them, if you can use that as a way to sort of define for yourself what your values are, then in life, when you are making a decision, you can help kind of figure out, is it ticking one of these boxes? If not, maybe you shouldn't do it. And so, you know, doing a personality assessment, going through sort of mental thought experiments like this, combined together along with your personal interests and things that, you know, will be, you know, relevant to wherever you happen to be at that given time, can help you establish what that goal should be. And there's certainly a process around this.
Agreed. I would like to like give a little bit of my input as like a writer. One of my friends, she's really good at writing, and she gave me this concept of following the rabbits. And I think the reason why she said the rabbit is because you end up down a rabbit hole. So sometimes as a writer or anyone who's creative, and I think this is applicable even if you're not a creative, you get like a bout of inspiration to do something, and it's for you. And you feel like, I want to do this. It may not be directly related to what you're studying or what you're working as right now, but you might be like, hey, I want to try tennis, or like, hey, I want to try picking up this new skill, for instance. So my friend says, like, try following the rabbits and see where that leads you, because many times we might just like ignore it. We see the rabbit going by, we don't choose to follow it, we just choose to continue on with our lives. But like following these little threads of inspiration, you might end up with something bigger. And I really, really like that analogy. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And I think that connects quite powerfully with what we were saying at the beginning in terms of the growth mindset, because at the core of it, it's being curious. Be curious about what there is out there, because if you assume you know, then you don't see the rabbit. You don't see the opportunities when you're there. But if you assume that there's something to be gained, then the incentive is there for you to be aware, to be present in your reality, and to be able to hop, no pun intended, to hop onto the opportunities when they come.
Exactly, that's so true. Okay, we've got some like nice comments here. Danam is saying the crux of what Sam is saying is self-awareness, and that is something that we all need to do. I totally agree. That's the key. Sam is very succinct. He nailed it by saying that you know yourself and then you find the vocab for that. That is very, very powerful. The problem is there's just so much in front of you that is pulling you in all directions.
Right. Yeah. There's something that I would recommend just in terms of, you know, dealing with sort of the stress of things, is that when, and this might not be directly, I mean, because there's so many things that are pulling us in many directions, but sometimes what can be extremely distracting are concerns, things that are worrying us. And COVID is a perfect example of that. There's so many question marks, and human beings, we don't naturally like question marks. You know, we can play with them a little bit, like in a thriller movie. They're sort of like, oh, where's it coming? Oh my God, there it is. But it answers the question in the movie. Like you get the question mark, you play with that natural sort of primal like curiosity, that sort of fear, that dislike, but you give the answer so it's comfortable and safe. If there was a movie that had question marks and then just didn't answer any of them, and then there's no to be continued, no second movie, the audience would go crazy. And so, yeah, dealing with concerns is an important one, and it causes a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress. And so, you know, something that I'd recommend is, honestly, if you, every time that you find that you are, and this is a bit of a mindfulness exercise, but you identify something that is concerning you, and then try to ask sort of why. Explore what it is, and then give it a name. And what I'd suggest is that you write down what it is, and give it a few sentences, describe why it is you think this is concerning you, you know, put a date on it, fold it up, and put it in a box. And then have it when a few days later, you might have another one. It might be the same, it might be different. And then write it, put it in the box. What you'll do is, over time, you'll accumulate in this box a number of these concerns. And what you'll find is that when you open this box, is that a lot of these concerns aren't as heavy as they used to be. You'll be able to review them, and you'll say, actually, this is not such a big deal for me anymore. Or I've realized that, hey, there's no blood on the floor, nobody died. Actually, I'm okay. Maybe it's a lot more up here than it was anything. And so by there's two parts to this. By one, over time, collecting these, you're kind of reminding yourself, physically reminding yourself that there's a place that you can go to show you, to kind of bring you back to that sense of that I don't have to be commandeered by my emotions, that I don't have to be the victim to them, because sometimes, you know, they can be extremely distracting and can sort of betray us in ways. And the other thing is also downloading. I like to think through ink. So taking concerns, and a similar exercise I do with people is like, if they're going up and they need to present, do public speaking, I'll have them write out just the worst possible scenario. You know, like, you know, you ask them what could go wrong. They could have a million, I don't know. It's like, there's so many things, and you write them down. And they actually go, actually, it's really just 4 things. You go, okay, great. That's one step. It's not a million things. There's 4 things. That makes it a little bit more bearable. You quantify it by writing it down. You download what it is. And then you're kind of looking at a mirror there. So you've got to observe sort of what is driving these emotions and feelings for you. And then what you're able to do is what I suggest to them is then to take it, tear it up, and throw it away. And there's something somewhat symbolic about that as well. But it's kind of part of the ritual around this. But I guess my point really being is that by taking things and writing them down, making them tangible, you actually recognize that it might feel like there's a million, like we're a marionette puppet and there's a million things pulling us in every direction. When you realize actually there's only a few things, and that makes it a little bit more bearable and maybe can help inform. It's not going to fix the situation, but it can put you in the mindset that's going to help you realistically address them sort of case by case.
Can I ask you a hard question?
Sure. Yeah, of course.
What do you do? Like, because I journal a lot, so I write down stuff a lot. And sometimes I also write down like all the problems that I need to overcome and what's the worst that could happen. What if like I could write these down, but I'm not in the position to just like tear them up and throw them away because they have very real consequences. What do you do then?
Right. Well, I think that, you know, in the end, in life, it goes back to that idea of which lever. You know, we cannot control other people. We cannot control the sort of universe and the world around us. What we can control are the way we think and the things that we do. And there's a big piece around acceptance in this. If you need to do the next good thing, what is the next kind thing that if you were to do it, you'd be able to look back at yourself and say, you know, I'm sort of proud of myself. If it's not, if you do something you think you're not going to be happy with what you did, you probably shouldn't do it. And so there's no sort of clear-cut answer to something like this. I mean, you know, meditation is a powerful, powerful tool. And it's something that the reason it's ancient and has lasted so long is that cognitively, there's clearly, even neurologically, we see that there's clear benefits to quieting the mind and centralizing yourself so you're not so caught up in the narrative and the chatter. But when it comes down to something specific like this, where you know that this is something that is concerning you, it is about being sort of kind to yourself. How is it serving you? Are these emotions helping you be the best person you can be in this situation? Is it getting in your way? Are there things that you could be doing? Could you be pulling the action lever? Could you be having honest conversations with somebody that you care about, if it is somebody that you care about? Could you be distancing yourself and creating boundaries for yourself? Is that a conversation that you need to have? I think when they live up here and they don't manifest themselves in terms of some sort of action, you can end up sort of spiraling into this internal narrative of you wallow, you live there. When I think there's a lot, the reason that we go back, we're able to reflect on a lot of, you know, our past. I heard a quote recently that peace of mind rarely comes from a past remembered or a future imagined. You know, it's about presence of mind. The future doesn't exist here, and we spend a lot of time daydreaming about what could be. And we also reflect a lot on what has happened in the past, what shoulda, coulda, woulda been done. And I think both are useful. I mean, we've evolved them for a reason. They allow us to help, you know, learn from the past and then project and almost rehearse and practice for the future. But you shouldn't live in these. They're not, essentially, they're not the reality that we need to be in. The reality is the now and the decisions that we're going to be making. And so if the emotions are getting in your way, allow them to be. I'm not saying deny the emotion, embrace it, give it a name. Say, this is sorrow. Once you've allowed yourself to take that deep breath, then go, what actions can I take to help alleviate some of this pain for myself or for the people I care about or for the situation? Because I know there's, especially with COVID, there's a lot that you can't deal with and there's a lot you can't control. And so the only logical conclusion, sort of the humbly pragmatic conclusion that one must take is to sort of say, okay, what can I do? How can I be of service to the people around me? Is there something I can do within my community for the people that I care about? And so engaging in some form of action gives you a sense of control. It helps alleviate some of the question marks, and so taking action is something quite powerful. And there's a lot of things, even finding hobbies that you can do, just engaging your mind in something constructive and productive and tangible is, it's not a cure, but it can certainly help alleviate that and get you to a place where you have a little bit more mental clarity so that you can possibly make a decision about what you should do next.
That's beautiful. You've given us a lot of great tools to deal with this and like to really help. That I'm saying, Sam, that's a very, very helpful suggestion. A note, download. Thank you. We also have another question from Lao Zhenwei. He's a little bit more specific. He's asking, how would you help people who are ex-offenders or people with mental health issues as they face stress, worry, and anxiety? And how will you teach or explain a growth mindset to people with these issues?
How would you teach a growth mindset to these people with these issues, and what would you suggest dealing with the stress?
Is it even ours to teach?
Yeah, I don't think, and that's something I have to be careful with myself, is that, I'm not assuming that I have answers to any of this. I really am just reflecting on my own life and my relationships with the people in my work and in the world that I live in. When it comes to mental health, there's a number of different things that can mean. Mental health is a broad spectrum, and I think that it really is sort of case by case. But we'll take, say depression, for instance. I honestly, I'm not in any position to be able to tell somebody how to deal with their depression. But what I can say is asking for help is something powerful. It goes back to that growth mindset. The ability to say, I can't control this, I need some help, is a very, very powerful first step. And I think it's because even the irony is in looking at something like, say depression, is that there's sort of a low sense of self-esteem. There's a low sense of personal value. However, they still assume that they're right. They assume that, no, I'm not. I know I'm not. There's still sort of an ego behind it. Even though it's a negative, it's still based in ego. And so what I would say is just, it goes back to that humility piece. Like, listen to people around you. Ask people for insight and ask people for help around things. Even if it's just an analogy, have them tell stories about difficulties they've had. A question might be, what's some difficulties you've had and how do you deal with those negative emotions? They might not answer for you, and it's certainly not going to fix it for you. Everybody's journey is their own, and taking the next step you need to take to combat this negative worldview is something that is quite powerful. And I think that's not for me to really say what you should or should not be doing, but asking for help is a powerful one. Reaching out to community, and one of the most powerful things I've found when I'm feeling like I'm dealing with mental health. Mental issues around just being discontent or being stressed or anxiety or whatever it might be, which universally we all experience on some level, to varying degrees, but on some level, it's still a human experience. I'd say that it's being of service. How can you support your friends? How can you, because by helping other people, you are helping yourself. There's something profound about that. And you see that across all cultures. Even Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I don't know if you've ever heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the very top, they talk about self-actualization, but beyond that, Maslow talked about, he never amended it, but at the end of it, being of service was beyond self-actualization. He's like, you actualize the self, and then what do you do with that? You then become a teacher of some sort. You educate children. You try to support people who are in need, who don't have what that you have. And that's that powerful sort of cycle that can really sort of give you a greater sense of health and well-being. Again, this was specific sort of to depression, but I think there's sort of universal applications there, just being of service, and because it gives you a sense of being of use. And we all want to belong. We all want to be accepted in a community. And so by being of use, we are in a sense making ourselves part of something.
I love that. It's so true. It's really, really true. And like a lot of the times the questions we have at first, it's like, how can we become better for ourselves? And the answer is often like actually found in others or helping like the greater community, which I think is really beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, we're kind of like at the halfway point. We're actually 2/3 into the hour. That was really fast.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. No.
We've got like 20 minutes left, and like we mostly just talked about like the first question because like we had like three big questions, but we talked
Sure,
about so many
sure.
great things. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. Oh, we improvise. We improvise. It's fine.
yeah, we improvise, and I think we did like answer some of the things that we have in the other questions. I'd also
Sure.
like to say to the people who are watching, we had like a giveaway last week, so I just want to say like if you're still watching, feel free to stay until the end because we'll be like spinning a virtual wheel of winners for the people who are going to win a $40 NTUC voucher. So that'll be happening at the end of the hour.
Very
but
cool.
yeah. But for now, let's move on to like the next couple of questions. So we wanted to talk about navigating ambiguity. That was one, and there was also appreciating our individual value. That was like another one,
Mm,
and we
mm,
have another one about habits that build resilience. Out of these
mm.
three, are there any particular topics that you want to start talking about first, Sam?
Um, Habits that build resilience. I think, okay, so you had a question at the beginning about sort of people living at home and the dynamic with their family and so on. And I think the habits that build resilience, there's a kind of a nice connection there between the two. So we can kind of answer that question that you had before and link it in with this one. So why don't we go with that?
Let's do that. Okay.
Great.
So, do you have
Um,
any like habits at the top of your mind, or is this something that you've been doing at home that help you build that resilience and have better relationships with people back at home?
sure, sure. Well, there's something that we practice, and you may have heard of it. I don't know. Have you ever heard of a NICAM meditation?
No.
The NICAM meditation. So in Chinese, it's Neiguan, and it's the idea. It's a simple little meditation, but it's about relationships basically. And so the way that it works is that it's got three components to it, and you can do it as a written exercise. In fact, you think of a person that's been stressing you out, somebody who maybe you feel some resentment towards, a little animosity towards, and what you're going to do is you're going to focus on that person, and especially if it's somebody who you're in close proximity to, i.e., somebody you work with, somebody you're potentially in a relationship with, or a member of your family. And what you do is that in this process, you answer, what gifts have they given you? Step one. What gifts have they given you? And you have to write down. You have to write down at least three. The goal is five, but you
Okay.
have to write down at least three. And this is tough. I mean, off the bat, you're there going, gifts they give me? They haven't given me anything. But these can be little things. It can be things like showing up at work. It could be things like giving you some personal space. It could be things like, going to bed at a reasonable time and not staying out, all night, or, making a lot of noise at night. There's little things like that you can say, but you need to come up with three, ideally five gifts that this person has given you. Okay, that's the first step. So you do that and you go, oh, okay. Well, if I have to, I guess they show up to work on time. If they didn't, this would be even harder. So yeah, they show up to work on time, and so you go through that process. The second phase of it is that you then write down three or up to five things, gifts that you have given them. That's easy. Oh my God, everything. It's easy. Oh, I do this for them. I clean the dishes. I walk the dog. You could write a list, and that's the difference between number one and two. Now for number two is like only five. So you begin to see the contrast there.
Yeah.
And then the next question is, what difficulties have you caused this person? And you have to again
Okay.
write three, ideally five difficulties, ways that you've made life difficult for this person. How have you contributed to the stress that you two are feeling? The worst thing is that's where it ends. You don't get, there's no fourth step to it. You don't get to write a list of all the things that that they have done to you. We want to.
Yeah.
The easiest thing in the world is go, oh, they did this to me, they did this, they did this, they did your litany of grievances, your list of all the things. You don't get a chance. And that's the point. The point is acceptance. You can't control them. You can control yourself. And through going through this process, you sort of say, what are the gifts that I have given them? What's something positive? Identify that. Congratulate yourself for that. What are the gifts that they've given me? Great. Appreciate the little things. Gratitude is something very, very powerful here. And then recognize how you have played a role in creating this difficulty. Because again, our eye stays outward. We don't see ourselves. And so in many ways, we've got a disadvantage. You know, people are like mirrors to us. And this is not something that I made up. This is something I've heard before, but I think it's profound and quite beautiful, is that like other human beings are like mirrors to ourselves in that it's all relative. We interact with them and I behave a certain way and it creates a reaction in a person. You know, this is why my mother and I talk about using theater, is recognizing, having the self-awareness of the way that you react. People don't know your intention. You can have the best intention in the world and react in sort of a snarky way. And people will see that and react to the way that you're behaving, not to what's going on in your head. And so that similar idea of, you know, sort of the mirrors, if people are sort of reflections on us and our behavior, you wouldn't take the lipstick, for instance, and put it on the mirror, would you? You don't brush the hair on the mirror. No, you want to change the reflection, you change your behavior, and that changes the way things go. And it doesn't mean compromise everything and put yourself low, but it's just recognizing how relative the interactions are with people. And I think that there's something quite powerful in sort of at least accepting that is the truth. And then little by little, because it's not a race, it's, you know, little by little, just building the awareness. And next time you catch yourself behaving a particular way, like saying yes, but to every time somebody gives an idea, catch yourself and go, no, sorry, continue. Share more about your idea. Little things like that can actually have a ripple effect in terms of, you know, the relationships in your life. And so in terms of creating a more resilient mindset, you know, that acceptance piece, learning and practicing how to accept things that you cannot control. It's hard and you may never master it. I don't think many people can master it, but it is something that you can practice. And it's not about the end goal. It's about the journey itself. And so by doing it, you know, pursue that. And that's a good way to go. And gratitude. I saw a speaker one time and the speaker pulled up a monk and the monk went to the audience and just said, hey, does anybody have a toothache? Does anybody's tooth hurt?
Okay.
Nobody said yes. He said, isn't that fantastic? Because when you do have a toothache, it's the most distracting thing in the world. And being appreciative of the little things can change the entire way that you see the world. And so it's not like this is something that I do perfectly myself, but these sorts of practices, once a week, maybe once a day before bed, what's something you're grateful for? Write it down, put it in your diary. You know, if you've got your journal, absolutely. Just one thing, make that the title to some poem that you write. Each day, here's something I'm grateful for, and then write a haiku about it. You know, it's just these little practices that will, you know, it's an interesting thing where you're looking to sort of train your subconscious in a way. You know, there's a lot of underlying processing that's going on. Like there's sort of an algorithm on our baseline that's kind of flowing. And it's about kind of training that to recognize these things, because the more you do it, the more you will see it in the world around you. It's the same way that we learn to juggle. You know, you practice it and you just get better at it. Your brain will naturally it's plastic, as they say, and it will naturally begin to adapt and see these things. So that would be a tip around building resilience.
That's amazing. Wow. There's a lot of great stuff in there. This is very rich and there's plenty of wisdom in that. Thank you, Sam. Lao Shenwei is also saying thanks for spending time and speaking in the SOA community chat. Yeah, we really appreciate it.
Of course, it's a pleasure. No, this is a treat. It's a treat. Absolutely. I hope I haven't just been banging out too many things. I recognize we only had a limited time, but I do know that people are feeling, at least they're feeling discomfort, if not pain. And I hope that a little bit of this might be useful for people in their lives and in their work.
Yeah, no, I think this is great. I think this is something that I want to go back and rewatch. And hopefully we can, you know, like there's so many different aspects of it. And I can see so many practical things that we can apply in our lives for this. Yeah. I wanted to like just give like a quick comment, like about how you said that we are able to change. We can't change other people, but we can change our behavior, and that actually changes others. I think that is so true, because many times I have found myself saying like, I don't think there's like a way around this. And this is like a silly, like random example, but one time I was like visiting my friend with her dog, and her dog had this thing where like every time she saw me, she would like bite my shins. Like she had this thing like she wants to show like who's boss. You know,
right.
And I always played the victim. I was like, oh no, and then like I tried to like pet her away, but it would like I would try to like shoo her away. It would never really work. Every time I showed up, same thing. She like basically bullied me. This tiny little dog, you know. And I was so convinced in my head that okay, she's never gonna change until one day, like my friend told me, hey, I need your help to take care of my dog. And I'm like, I don't think I want to do this.
Yeah.
And she's
Oh
like,
no.
and she's like, no, I need your help. It'll be fine. She depends on you for food, and she knows it. It's different. And I'm like, oh, what do you mean? So
Right.
I went there and I took care of her for a couple of days, and her dynamic with me completely changed. And I was
Cool.
so surprised. She loved me so much. She never did that annoying thing again. And she saw me as like, oh, okay, this human is now like alpha. So
Mm.
that was like just like a funny random little example, because I it made me think about how many times in life I look at people around me, I look at situations around me, and I'm like, I don't think anything can change about this. I feel like I'm
Mm.
stuck here. But
Yeah.
sometimes there is a way out. We just haven't figured it out yet, or we,
Sure.
we were like trapped in that little box.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great, and I think we sort of said earlier, it's like, who's your audience? How are you communicating? And in your case, it was a dog, and so you have to use their language. It's the same thing as a leader, or as a parent, or as a partner. Who are you communicating for yourself, or are you communicating for them? Because if you're communicating for yourself, they may not pick up on the message. You need to take into consideration the person that you're speaking with, and speak about it in a way that's going to make them feel what you need them to feel. Because in order for you to accurately and effectively communicate what your intentions are, it is about how you communicate and how you adapt those things based on the situation. So I think that's fantastic. Yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Like you have to speak to them on their level and figure that out. Yeah. Um, And I'm saying thank you so much for sharing so freely. I'm really loving this, and I'm glad that you're not holding back either, and just like giving all of these nuggets of wisdom. It's so
Sure.
useful. Okay, let's see. Mm, we could still talk about
I I
appreciating our
actually
own. Yeah.
I was just going to say, there's something that you brought up the piece there about child abuse, and I think there's something quite profound there, just in that there's been research that has been done around this, and it's interesting because mathematically, if if parents that abuse their children created children that abuse their children, mathematically you would potentially see there would be, within several generations, you would have billions of people that did it. It would happen exponentially. And so what's actually interesting is, in research in this, more likely than not, and I'm not sure if the example that you used is just an example, it's like a sort of a metaphor, or just a general story. But what they've actually done is research in this, and what they find is that more often than not, a child that has been actually abused is less likely to abuse their child, because there is something fundamentally sympathetic about human beings. And so I think there's something there. It's not something to overlook. I think, when they talk about sort of, what is sort of human nature, and every culture has explored that a little bit. I think that insight right there is something quite profound to take away, is that we can do things in spite. However, when it comes down to just sort of nurturing our children, that there's this sense of right and wrong that does prevail. And I think that's something to not to just sort of shrug off. So I appreciate what you were saying in that example, that you have a child that does and a child that doesn't. But what they've actually found in research specifically around this is that more often than not, that they don't. And I think that's quite a profound thing. And it speaks to sort of the human spirit and capacity for love and care.
Yeah,
Just
that
something
is
I wanted
really.
to add to that.
Thank you for that. That's really, really nice to hear. And I'm glad that it's backed by research even.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. 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 No, when I read that, it was one of those where it's just like, oh, yes, yes, yeah.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh. I would like to talk about for the people watching, before we started this chat, I was actually emailing Sam, and I was like asking him, hey, because it's COVID-19, we have a lot of free time for ourselves. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about like upgrading ourselves, or like improving ourselves. And Sam
mm,
mentioned, what about appreciating our own individual value?
mm,
And
mm,
for
mm,
me,
mm.
that was like something that was a little bit different, because raised in Singapore, having like the very much the study mentality, you must succeed. I never really think about like appreciating, like who has time for appreciating yourself? Why not just improve yourself and appreciate yourself in the process? So I would love to hear your thoughts on this, Sam, and like what do you think of how we should be
Right,
looking at ourselves and why?
right, right. I think that there's a distinction to be made between because you can absolutely, you can pursue things, and it depends on what your motivation is. If it's a sense of inadequacy, or a sense of constantly looking, because you can think of somebody who becomes the CEO of a company, and they're constantly sort of insatiable. It's like they're constantly looking for achievement. And this is something you see in personality. There's a metric, a subtrait of the human, of what's called consolidation, which is around how we achieve goals. And one of those subtraits is called drive. It's how driven we are. And most people go, yes, I'm very driven. Driven is important, However, you think about it, say, in Japan, for instance, and you were to go to a famous sushi restaurant, and there's a sushi master there, and they've spent their lives mastering this. They've spent, they've done their 10,000 hours and all of that. And they've succeeded in that they have upgraded their skills continuously. However, if somebody comes to that restaurant and says, hey, listen, this is a wonderful restaurant. We want to open up restaurants all over Japan. In fact, in 5 years, we'll have restaurants all over Asia and the world. And that master, that chef goes, no, thank you. And so I want to make a distinction there, because there's that drive to succeed in terms of proliferate and grow. I want to conquer versus no, I want to master myself. I want to be very, very good at one thing. And I'm not saying wanting to grow and become, say, the CEO of a company, that desire to lead and that desire to achieve more is good. But I think it's balanced, because it was Alan Watts who had a story about the example he used is life being like a song. If at the end of a song, that there's a big cymbal crash, and you wait the entire song for that last cymbal clash, it'll happen and you realize you missed the entire song.
Oh, so true.
You know what I mean? And so if that's the goal and you're always looking for that, and then you'll get there and you'll get to that table and you realize, oh, I'm here. Wait, how did I get here? What happened to all the relationships and the things that I value in my life? And especially if you're sacrificing yourself exclusively for that. And so I'm not saying don't be ambitious. I think that's a common misconception when I'm talking about looking for fulfillment in one's life. I've had people sort of say, oh, no, I'm not driven, which is why I use the sushi chef example. Because saying, no, you can look to master and to acquire new skills without being sort of blindly driven by ambitions where it's just sort of continuously looking for more. Because you're never going to get there. Our brains are hardwired. In fact, this is something that's quite interesting, is that the amount of dopamine that gets released in the brain and looking at a mango, or when you haven't eaten it, of like, ooh, I want a mango, releases a certain amount of dopamine. The amount of dopamine that gets released when you eat the mango is less. It makes sense, because you need to release more to encourage you to go across and maybe run into a tiger to get that mango. So it needs to motivate you to get there. And then it needs to reward you a little bit and go, okay, well then you got the mango. So they call it the hedonic treadmill. It's like there's this sort of constant desire that you're never going to be able to satisfy. You're just never going to be able to get it. It's always like, oh, it'll be better just a little bit longer, just a little bit longer. But our brains are actually hardwired to never be able to truly get that. And so you will get a lot of dissatisfaction in the way that you live. And so bringing this back to that central idea of sort of human value and your own sense of your own value. Well, it goes back to, well, what do we mean by value? You could look at this mug, this mug, not particularly expensive. Might be a Kia. It's not, but basically it's a standard mug. The value is what it cost me. However, if somebody were to tell me that this was the last mug that this was Michael Jackson's favorite mug, all of a sudden the value of this mug just skyrockets. Value is relative to the stories of Asia, the stories that we tell about ourselves and about other people. And it's the same reason that money works. That's why Bitcoin was created. Cryptocurrencies are based on that observation that money currency is it's a narrative that we all accept, that this money, which is actually quite dirty, this money has value. And then we all just go under this assumption that the value is created through the story and the exchange. And that's why they created crypto. They said, well, if you can do that with paper, we can do that with something else. We just need to get enough people. If enough people believe in this, it has value. And so one of the things I'll say is that value is dictated by your own narrative. Like, one of the things that I often say is, if you were to look at, say, the way that your parents see you and the way that they value you, and that might vary from person to person. Not everybody has an ideal, family situation. But generally speaking, if you were to look at it and sort of say, listen, would you say that your parents value you more than they value, say, their neighbor? Most people will say, well, yeah, probably. I mean, I'm their child. It's like, great. Okay. So you recognize that your value is sort of dictated by the situation. Nobody can tell you you're not important. Only you can tell you that you're not important. And I think we have a tendency to do that. They've done studies on people where it's interesting. You're more likely, if you get medication, you're more likely to take care of if say your dog gets sick, you're more likely to be very strict and specific about making sure your dog gets once in the morning, once after lunch, and once at night. You'll be very strict about that. But when it comes to medication and self-medication, we're not very good at it. We tend to go, oh, I'll be fine. It's like this, it's weird. It's like we have this pathology where we don't see our value as being as important as other people, even though we are still sometimes quite arrogant. It's like this contradiction that kind of exists within us. So it's never that black and white. It's never that simple. But recognizing that can actually help us, and just sort of recognizing that. So I'll give an exercise. Something that you can do is you can do a timeline, say 2 years. You go 2 years, and over those 2 years, along the top, so it's a line, and then you've got today's date. And then along the top there, what you can do is you can write down all of your successes over the last 2 years. What have been the things that you've done wonderfully, the things that you're proud of? And they could start with the big things, like the things that stand out, like, oh, I got this promotion, or, oh, I made this big sale, or, oh, I made I baked my sister's birthday cake myself. Good. And they could be little things as well, like, oh, I started studying a new language, or, oh, I've started, smiling more, whatever it might be. Little things, little successes along the top. And then along the bottom, what you're going to do is you're going to write down the things that you would classify as failures. Same condition, same rule. Big things as well as little things, little failures that you find that kind of creep up and get in your way, where you look at it and you go, yeah, this has been difficult for me. Maybe I should, whatever that might be, definitely write those down as well. And then afterwards, look at that timeline, that trajectory, and recognize that both the successes and the failures constitute you, and they're both important. You're failing because you're trying, you're exploring, and that's something to be proud of. Recognizing that engaging with life is never something that you should feel badly about. And if there's something that you did wrong and you do feel badly about it, sure, learn the lesson. Try to avoid doing that in the future. You may do it again, learn from it and try to avoid it again in the future. But it's a progress. It's about being forgiving of yourself. I mean, the question is, are we being gentle with ourselves? And sometimes that's difficult. But by once again, visually representing successes and failures, and then recognizing that they're both one and the same, that success is a verb. It's not a destination. It's not about where you get. It's about the journey as a whole. It's a constant happening. We don't know. I mean, I could not be around tomorrow. I would like to think that my journey so far has been successful in some ways, in terms of the relationships that I've had with the people that I care about in my life, and so on. And so just appreciating the failures and the successes, the things that you've done well, that you're proud of, as being one and the same. And recognizing they're all part of your story, and your story to date is about, okay, so that's where I've been. What have I learned about where I've been, and how is that going to inform where I want to go? Because once we have structure, it's less ambiguous. It becomes sort of saying, okay, so these are the things that I want to do more of, and these are the things that I want to do less of. Fantastic. Moving forward, that's how I'm going to do it. And by doing that, what you're proving to yourself is saying, I'm worthy. I'm worthy of investing in. I'm worthy of spending time to develop, to cultivate. And in doing so, what you can do is you can really see, and again, see the value that you can offer other people. Being of service comes to that. You'll begin to appreciate your value in doing so. And so I think upgrading skills is important, and that can be part of that journey. It can give you that confidence to say, yes, no, I did this and I've been successful, or I did this and it wasn't really for me. Maybe I need to try harder. Maybe I'll try, instead of reading 5 books, every few months, I'll try to read maybe just 2 books every few months. Baby steps. It's going to be different for different people. And it's about understanding yourself so that you can begin to action plan around that. And that's a big important thing for me. It's all good and well to have the aha moment, that so desu ka, or so desu ne. But getting there is the first step. After you have that eureka, it's about, okay, what are you going to do moving forward? And so creating some kind of action plan around that. So I think the timeline is a simple way of just sort of seeing your value and recognizing that, and this is an important thing, recognizing that your perspective is valuable to other people. And this is something, and NASA does a lot of research into, if we are going to go to Mars, that's a one-way trip. We need to have a certain number of people go up there, and we need to think about not only what technology do we need, but we need to think what kind of team do we want to put together. And what they found is that cognitive diversity is key. you need different kinds of people. You need people with a sense of humor. You need people who are more imaginative. You need people who are more practical. You need people who are more skeptical, people who are more hopeful. All of these things are key. And so all of us have a perspective, a unique perspective that is of value collectively. Again, greater than the sum of our parts. So seeing the contribution and knowing that no matter who you are, your contribution is of value to somebody, you have to be, it will encourage you to speak up. And that's, I think, is important, because it's all good and well to have ideas, and sometimes we don't even let ourselves see them. But if you're given an opportunity, speak up about what it is you have to say, or write it down and then secretly pass it to somebody. Whatever it might be, contribute. That is the key. Take an action. Don't let it just live up here, because otherwise it's just theory and it's not really part of reality. It's just the story you're telling yourself.
Love it. Really, really love it. Wow. Okay. Nina is saying awesomely captivating session and useful tips shared today. Thank you, Sam, Sarah, and team at SOA. Brilliant, guys. I agree. This was really, really great, Sam. You gave
This was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad we got to do this, and I'm looking forward to kind of seeing how SOA continues to grow. I mean, I'm really interested in what Sam and you and the whole team are kind of doing, and I'm eager to kind of see this again evolve over time.
I'm really, really glad. And I want to know, like, are there any resources that you have? Like, have you like written a book already, or if anyone's watching, they want to find out more about you or more about what you have to say, is there anywhere that they can find you? Or yeah.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, LinkedIn is probably the easiest place to go. It's Sam Bobertz, SAMBOBERTZ.com, or StarMaker HK. I mean, StarMakerHK.com is our website. And it's basically, that's the best way to get in touch with us. It kind of links you into a number of things that we're doing. We're constantly experimenting, exploring, and most importantly for me, collaborating on any number of things with really powerful change makers around Asia. I'm always eager to figure out what it is that I can do to be of service to the community. And I'm always looking to meet new wonderful people.
That's great. I've dropped your LinkedIn and we'll drop your website as well in the comments so that people can follow. Just the last couple of comments before we start giving out the prize. William says, thanks for sharing such insightful tips and wisdom throughout the session. I really enjoyed listening to what you had to say about cultivating a growth mindset and very practical tips. And Lola says, thanks y'all, this was really insightful. Okay, so thank you so much, Sam. This is really nice.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Sam, would you like to stay on like while we give out the prize, the wheel? We've actually never done this before, so it'll be quite interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'd love to.
All right. Let's see if we can pull up the wheel on the main screen. Okay, we have it here. These are the names of everyone who commented last week. Written it here, and you guys stand a chance to win a $40 NTUC voucher. Okay, gonna click on the wheel to start spinning. And let's see who the winner is. It is Faith Jia. Faith, congratulations. Oh, that's great. You've just won a $40 NTUC voucher. Feel free to drop us a message. We'll also drop you an email as well, and we will mail it to you. Thank you so much. And really looking forward to having you guys on the next session, which is tomorrow. Tomorrow it's with Privin. He has an amazing story. He was in the pioneer team of AirAsia Singapore, and he actually has chronic pain. So he's been through a lot of hardship in his life and has still achieved success. So he'll be talking about how to achieve success in the face of adversity and being sick as well. So looking forward to that. And yeah, thank you so much for your time today, Sam. We really, really appreciated it.
That was my pleasure. No, it was wonderful speaking with you as well.
All right.
Yeah.
Take care, Sam.
Take care. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.